Hello and welcome to this YouTube live. And today we're talking about building muscle for women over 40. So it is absolutely fantastic to have you here and welcome. The first thing I'm going to talk about is there's a poll in the chat. So you won't see this if you're watching the recording back, but if you are live, I want to know what your interest is in building muscle. And there's actually a poll in the chat that asks you a series of questions, and I'm gonna actually talk about it in towards the middle of this live, because I want to see what your answers are about how interested you are in building muscle. Do you want to build a little bit of muscle? Are you scared you're going to get bulky? Do I look bulky? Do you think I look bulky? Maybe you do. And, what is do you want to build as much muscle as possible? Or do you not? Maybe you don't want to build a muscle. I don't think there's a section there for that. But, it's really interesting for me to know what your position is on building muscle. And a lot of people talk about getting toned. Getting toned is actually building muscle. But as you can see, I've got my equipment here. I'm actually going to be demoing exercises today. That's what's going to be happening. And so if I just get my camera a little bit better than that. And then what I'm going to do is dive into the chat. I can see there's still people arriving. What I'm going to do is actually dive into the chat later on and kind of answer some questions. So what are we going to be talking about today with lifting weights? And I've also got bands here. Is we're going to be talking about what are the key exercises that women over 40 should be doing. So that's the first thing. Then we're going to be talking about something called progressive overload. And I'm going to be sharing with you, maybe you already know this, some of the key mistakes that women make over 40 when it comes to lifting weights. So, that's really important as well, because you need to know the mistakes. And I'm going to be talking about the intensity of your workouts, and then just a quick word about nutrition at the end. Now, if you want to know more about nutrition, I actually have some free training. I don't know, Maymuna, would you be able to put that in the chat? Just trying to check whether it's actually in the chat there. Let's have a look in the comments. No, it's not. So Maymuna, would you put a link to our free training? There is a specific link that we should be using as well, which you will find in our internal system. So if you could put that in the chat, and then it's already pinned. Sorry, it's already pinned in the chat at the top. And if you're watching this as a recording, so my free training has actually got a load of stuff about nutrition, which will support this live that I've done today. Because unless you get your nutrition dialed in, you can't actually build muscle. Giving a clue about what I'm going to talk about at the end. But and also next week, I'm doing a whole live from my kitchen on nutrition. So let's get into it. So the first things first, when you're a woman over 40, there are some key lifts that are just going to make your progress so much better, and the ones that you need to be incorporating if it suits you. So I'm going to talk about whether an exercise suits you or not as we go through. But really, one of the first key exercises, and these are all compound lifts, so you won't see me cover every single lift that there is available. Because if it's things like bicep curls, that is not a compound lift. Tricep extensions, they're not compound lifts. And the first really key compound lift that all women over 40 should be doing in one way or another, and I'm going to talk about the different ways, is a squat. So the first thing is, if you're new to strength training, you can do something called an air squat or a squat without weight. So you want to be, actually, if you've never done any strength training before and you're kind of new to it and you've never squatted before, you want to be starting with like no weight at all. And I'm just kind of doing this a little bit just to warm my body up, because although I did I had my weight lifting session earlier on, my body's sort of got cool again. So I'm just warming my body up a little bit, but I'm not going to be doing a full workout. I'm just going to be demonstrating the key exercises and techniques that you want to incorporate. Now, for many of you, you're going to be working out at home. And so, we're talking dumbbell squats here because that's what I've got here to demonstrate. But you could do it with a barbell. You can do squats with a hack squat machine in the gym, even like something like a leg press. It's the same movement pattern, but it's, you're doing it on a machine. So maybe you're injured or something like that, and doing a squat is difficult, but you can do a leg press. So like I'm doing a front squat. You could also use a kettlebell like this, and you want to go down as deep as possible into the ground. And if I just go back there so you can see me properly, you can see my feet. And that is a really great standard squat. You could take 2 dumbbells and have them by your side. So that's really good if you want to increase the weight. And we're going to be talking about, I expect someone's already put in the question, how heavy should I be lifting? And I am going to be covering it, so do stay tuned. Now, other types of squats are, if I pick up, I've got my books here. So this is my book called Kickstart Fat Loss. And I actually put these, if you're in the gym, you would put plates. I tend to do squats with my heels raised when I'm doing a barbell squat, because I've got some issues with my mobility. And if I have my heels raised, I just find that I can go deeper into the squat. Now that is going to make it more quad focused. So, there's different types of squats that are actually going to, the narrower your legs are together, the more quad focus it's going to be. If you're holding the weight on the front, that's seriously going to hit your quads a little bit more. And if you have your heels raised, it's going to be more quad focused. So if I go down now into the squat, I find that's much more comfortable. And you can see I'm going lower. I can drop, I can get my ass right to the grass, as they say. So there's a few different techniques. And then one that I love to put in my programs, if any of you are doing my programs, I'll just move those books to one side, is I love to do a plie or a sumo squat, which is when your legs, you've got your feet like a ballet dancer. That's why it's called a plie squat sometimes. And they're wider than hip width apart. And you're going to go right down. You won't be able to go down as low as the standard squat. And that's going to be glute focused, a plie squat. Now, if you have some mobility issues, maybe knees are a problem for you, I'm just going to show you on a piece of furniture, but you can do something called a box squat, where you put a bench or a seat or a box behind you and you use that to support you. And what's going to happen with that is it means you're going to have a squat that's more glute focused. You won't be going as low in the squat. So it's going to just be slightly different muscles that you're working. If you're in the gym and you're using a barbell, it can just give you that extra bit of support to give you confidence to increase the weight a lot more. So that's the squat. And every woman, unless you've got some kind of mobility or injury issue, should be putting the squat into their routine. And of course, you could always, if you're beginning, you could always use a resistance band to do it. So I showed you without weight at all. Sometimes I get my clients to just start with resistance bands. Now, you're going to grow out of resistance bands eventually, and they just won't give you enough resistance. But they're really good for starting out, or if you're on vacation and you need like something that you can really pack lightly that's just going to give you that extra bit of resistance. So I just sort of put that around my head there. And then another thing you can use to add in resistance to your squat without using any kind of weight is one of these glute bands. And I use these a lot for warming up. So we want to have them kind of above the knees, somewhere above the knees, kind of below the glutes really for this. And what you're going to do is you're going to press your legs apart as you're squatting, and it's going to give you some resistance there. So again, I mean, really great for packing or for beginners, you know, packing for vacation. You can just kind of fit in this tiny little band, or the two small bands that are just going to be, you could even sort of, I know with some of my clients, they get it into carry-on as well. So that's the squat, all the different varieties. I haven't shown you with the barbell, but all the different varieties of the squat. The next key exercise for women over 40 that's a compound lift. So I'm just going to be talking about compound lifts today, because they're the lifts that use multiple muscle groups, and they're going to burn the maximum amount of calories. But also, because you're working lots of muscle, it's going to help you build muscle. And don't forget, if you're just joining, please do the poll that I've put in the chat about, you know, where you are with what you think about lifting weights. You know, do you want to put on muscle? Do you want to put on as much muscle as possible? Are you scared you're going to get bulky? You know, do you want to put on a little bit of muscle? So it's good for me to know, and I'll tell you where I am with it at the moment. And just to let you know as well, I actually lost some muscle because I was 10 weeks out of the gym from October through to December. So I'm very well placed to give this live today to tell you exactly how to put on muscle. You know, being an older woman, I am 58 now, and I can tell you it's not easy putting on muscle, and you do need a strategy around it. If you don't have a strategy, it's not going to work. And I see tons of women coming to me who've been trying and not succeeding. And so that's why I wanted to do this live. So the next thing I'm talking about is some kind of hinging movement you need to have in your armory, which is a deadlift. Now, a deadlift can be technical, and there are lots of ways of doing a deadlift. And I really, really love this movement because, like the squat, it works your lower body and it works your upper body. So it's really good for working lots of muscles, even your core, your back comes in, you know, we think about, we kind of think, oh, you know, deadlifts is more, you know, a leg movement. but you're literally working your whole body. So it's just such a fantastic movement, but really hard to master, really hard to master. And so when you're trying to master an exercise, it's always good to go fairly light to start off with. And then when you get better and better, you can start adding weight in. So if I just grab the dumbbells, so we've got a standard deadlift. So a standard deadlift, much better to probably do a standard deadlift with a barbell, really. But I'm going to show you anyway. You're kind of lifting from the ground and you're bending your knees quite a lot. So if I take this and do, so it's different from a squat because you're going to be bending forward rather than, you know, keeping your back straight. But very, very similar to an RDL, which is a Romanian deadlift. But with an RDL, you want to be not having your knees bent as much. And you're still going forward. And so you're doing the hinging movement. And so normally, if I'm working out at home, I tend to do the RDL. Really good for glutes, RDL, and hamstrings as well. So that's the RDL. And then there's something called a stiff leg deadlift or a good morning. They're pretty much the same. It's just that with a good morning, you tend to have your barbell here like that. With a stiff leg deadlift, you're going to use dumbbells by your side. And you're going to have, as the name implies, your legs are straight. And of course, you don't want, because you want a flat back. See, my mobility is not good enough to go very far down on that movement because I've got really tight hamstrings. You don't want to go so far down that you're curving your back in. Same with an RDL, you want to keep a straight back and you're sort of pushing your glutes out a little bit as well. And this one is really, really good for glutes, for growing glutes. So those are different kinds of deadlifts. The other thing is, with the good morning, if you're like me and you've got mobility issues, you may want to do it with a band, and it's probably going to be, to make it more challenging, you'll want to have a thicker band, a heavier band than this. But that's going to give you the movement. So that was a stiff leg deadlift, which is also called a good morning. You can see why it's called a good morning. So those are the first two exercises. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about body weight exercises, because often as women, I don't know whether you can sort of put in the chat, do you do body weight exercises? Often as women, we can kind of fear body weight exercises, things like push-ups, pull-ups, dips. You know, dips we can just do on a piece of furniture really quite easily in the home. And again, they're a compound movement and they work multiple muscles. And when we're talking about a push-up, we call them press-ups here in the UK. They are amazing for your overall fitness, mobility. And I know there's this clip that I used by Vonda Wright, and she's also written a book, Vonda Wright. And she says every woman over 40 should do a push-up. And I kind of agree, but I think that for many women, we're not confident on our upper body strength. And so it's something we can work up to. So as an example, the easiest way of doing one would be against the wall, like that. And then once we can do that, we might go, just making sure you can see me, we might go off our knees, like that. And then when we get confident, we'd want to go, and I've got my hands shoulder width apart, but if you're finding this is quite hard, the wider that you have your hands out, the easier it is. And so we want to be able to do full push-ups, and you want to be going down. You don't want to halfway down it like that. If you're going halfway down, you want to do it off your knees. So you're going all the way down. But to do them properly, if you're doing a full push-up, you want to go so your nose is almost touching the floor. And, you want to be able to do 5 to 10 of those. When you get really good, you can do 20 in a row. And you can hear, I'm actually getting out of breath. I've only done about 3. I'm getting out of breath. They're really good for your overall fitness. They don't just work your chest. So people sort of think, oh, they're a chest exercise. Yeah, they work your chest. They're really good for your core. You have to have amazing core strength to do push-ups or press-ups. Your quads, your hamstrings, your back as well. You bring your back into it. So pretty much the muscles all over your body, you're going to be working with a push-up. So that's probably the best body weight exercise that you can do. And if you're just joining, welcome. And I am talking about the best kind of exercises for women over 40, strength training exercises. And then I am going to be actually going through some techniques just after all the exercises that I've demonstrated. And then, of course, you've got a dip, which you can just go, I'm slightly off camera, so I do apologize about that. But dips, in fact, I was doing these in the gym on a parallel bar today. Dips are really amazing. And again, although we think of dips as a tricep exercise, they're much better than doing, if you are trying to build muscle on your triceps, they're actually better than doing tricep extensions like that, because you're working multiple muscle groups. You're doing your chest, your triceps, your shoulders, your core again comes in quite a bit. So really amazing. Don't fear doing body weight exercises, because I couldn't do body weight exercises until I reached my 50s. The more advanced body weight exercises, I could just about do push-ups on my knees in my 40s. And then I kind of gradually, that was the first thing I could master, was a full push-up. And it took me years to be able to do dips. They were my nemesis. And I mastered pull-ups, full unassisted pull-ups before I mastered dips. So don't be afraid. If you're older and you think, oh, it's not something I can learn, you can learn. The heavier you are, the harder it is. So I know that when I actually lost a few pounds on the scale, because you haven't got so much body weight to pull up, it actually made it better. But if you have a pull-up bar at home or in the gym, you can loop a band round to support you doing that first off, and then you can kind of graduate from there. So always don't give up on yourself. Think long term, not short term. And it's like, I will do that one day, because I couldn't do these body weight exercises. And then in halfway through 2025, I had an injury and mobility issues. And so I went purely into calisthenics and body weight exercises. And some of it is really tough. Some of it is advanced, because it's what gymnasts do. But you can work your way up to it, do modified versions until you're ready to sort of do the full version. And that's what I did. Now, so we've covered push-ups or any kind of press. So it could be just, it could be, you know, a chest press, which if I lie down here, I'll go a little bit further back actually, you know, you'd probably want to purchase a bench at home, but doing chest presses, the same movement pattern as a push-up, but of course it's like a whole lot easier. But I would say, you know, you do your chest presses as well as push-ups. And then the other key thing, now you may not be able to do this one because I know a lot of women have issues with their shoulders, but if your shoulders can take it, overhead shoulder presses are amazing for not, you know, the whole of your upper body is coming in, your back, your rear delts, your front delts, your mid delts, and also a little bit of your chest, the top of your chest is coming in. So I absolutely love shoulder presses. And the thing about shoulder presses, don't be afraid to have big shoulders. I was always small in my shoulders and I wanted to build them up. I just look longingly at women that had these like massive shoulders and think, oh, how can I build them up? And I really sort of struggled. And I just in the last few years had a lot of focus on doing that. But don't be afraid to build your shoulders up, because what that does is it gives you the illusion of a smaller waist. So in the bodybuilding bikini competitor world, we talk about an X frame. And that's what my whole ethos and how I put training plans together is based on an X frame. And an X frame is like you bring your shoulders out, because if you bring your shoulders out, your waist looks smaller. And I always had a problem, as I said, my shoulders, not anymore. You can see that there, but in my early days, I had a problem. The other thing is the other part of the X. So you build out your glutes and your quads, hamstrings as well, a little bit. So if you build bigger thighs and glutes, it's going to make your waist look smaller. And it's going to give you the hourglass shape. So you will actually look feminine. And that's important. So this is where the misconception can lie, where people say, oh, you don't look feminine, you look like a man. I've rarely been accused of looking like a man on my social media profile. It does happen from time to time, but very rarely, because I'm not really lean. I've got a healthy amount of body fat on me. You might have seen my video. I had my body fat percentage measured and it's just shy of 19%. So I'm not really lean, and therefore the leaner you are, in a way, the more masculine it can look, because what happens is your muscle stands out a lot more the leaner you are. And so this is where I always sort of think, well, you shouldn't be afraid to build muscle, because depending on how lean you are, the less lean you are, the more feminine you're going to look, really. And that's how it works. And the thing to say is as well that it's actually really, really hard to build muscle. And the people that you see that look, women that you see that look really, really muscular, it's generally because they take performance enhancing drugs. It's quite impossible to look like that otherwise. So I'm probably getting into what I'm asking you in the poll a little bit, but just never be afraid to sort of put on muscle. So rows are my next one. Now I talked about pull-ups. I can't demonstrate that here because I haven't got a pull-up bar, unfortunately. I'd love to demonstrate that. So you don't have to do pull-ups to work the back muscles, because if you go to a gym, you can do lateral pull down. So that's where you have a bar on a cable machine and you're seated and you pull it down. And if you've got dumbbells at home, you can do rows. Now, of course, it's not going to work exactly the same muscle, but it's the same movement pattern. And so rows, again, all of these exercises I'm giving you, it's a compound movement. So I can feel that now as I'm bending over. I can feel it in my back, my traps a little bit, my shoulders and my triceps. So I'm working multiple muscles. And if you're doing a pull-up, you're actually also bringing your core in. It works your core quite a bit. So rows are my last but one. And then the final exercise. So we've covered, this is like the sixth one that I'm going to talk about really. The final exercise I'm going to talk about, and then I'm going to talk about technique after this, is lunges. Now, lunges, I know not everybody can do them. It's a bit like overhead press. The most common issues that I find working with women over 40 that they have is knees, shoulders, back. I experience, for me, I get back pain and hip pain. I find, a lot of women have problems with their knees. We can really improve our knees through proper nutrition. Because I've worked closely with my partner Ken on this, who thought he couldn't do any kind of lunges, and now he does weighted walking lunges. You can improve your knees by exercising. So I'm going to demonstrate lunges, but first I'm just going to talk about this if you can't lunge. So it's really important to build the muscle around your knees, and it's going to really help with your knee mobility. So your quads, your hamstrings, your calves. If you build the muscle around your knees, you're really going to be able to improve the knees. And also anti-inflammatory nutrition, turmeric or curcumin, which is the extract, the active ingredient in turmeric, can really help as well. And the other one is collagen. So there are several ways to do lunges. I always find that if knee mobility is a problem for you and you can sort of vaguely lunge, probably the best way of doing it is not forward lunges, but reverse lunges that just protects your knees a little bit more. That's less aggressive on the knees. The other one, some people find they can't do them straight, as I'm showing you, straight back like this, but they can do curtsy lunges. So curtsy lunges are like how they sound. They're like a curtsy, and they go. Some people find when they've got bad knees, they can still do curtsy lunges, which actually looks more difficult to me. But some people find, I know from talking to clients, they can do that, but they can't do a lunge straight back. And as I said, forward lunges are probably the most aggressive on your knees. Now, if you're trying to sort of warm your knees up to be able to do that, I would say start without weight to start off with. And as I said, do reverse lunges to get your body used to it. But don't push it. If it feels really often painful, strengthen your legs first with the other exercises that I've talked about. The squats, the deadlifts. Get your legs strong. Even do things like calf raises. So I'm just going to do it with one dumbbell, but you can do it with two dumbbells. Do calf raises, even better if you can do those on a stair. So your foot is slightly on an angle going down. Calf raises are really good for strengthening your calves. So you're strengthening all the muscle around your legs. So those are the really best lifts to include in your armoury. There's not to say that you don't do others, but always include those. Not every single day. You can work out 3-4 times a week. I recently went back to exercise in December, having had quite a big stretch, 10 weeks out. And what I did is I did 3 times a week, full body workouts. And I was on a mission to build muscle still. I can build muscle on 3 times a week. You may know, but I'll tell you anyway, that if you do it twice a week, you're just maintaining what you've got. So you really need to do 3 times a week or more to build muscle, but you can build muscle perfectly well on 3 times a week. I've upgraded to 4 times a week now, but I was building muscle on 3 times a week. And if you're like me, you're starting back from a long time off, always go really gently and light to start off with. So now I'm going to talk about progressive overload in a minute, but I'm going to talk about some of the common mistakes first. What I talk about how to get it right. The common mistake, I don't know whether you know, perhaps you can put it in the chat whether you know some of these common mistakes. If you're in the business of building muscle, one of the common mistakes that everyone makes, almost everyone, and I did this, is they work out too much. They lift weights 7 days a week. That's what I was doing. I was going in the gym 7 days a week. And I couldn't understand it because I sort of thought, oh, my physique, it's not quite as good as some of these women that I can see. I see them in magazines. And I thought, I can't work it out because I'm training really hard. But I was overtraining. So you can overtrain. Now, optimally, you want to be working 3 to 5 times a week. You don't want to be doing any more than that with lifting weights. Because when do you grow muscle? Do you know when you grow muscle? You grow muscle when you're resting, when you're sleeping. So getting a good night's sleep and lifting 4 times a week would be better than going in the gym 7 times a week or your home gym lifting weights. And that's a completely misunderstood thing that people have. And, I know for me, I didn't really get visible muscle until I started really working to a schedule, a proper schedule, where I was like training, a different body part every time and having a structured plan. Once I had a structured plan and I wasn't training every single day, I started to see visible muscle. But I also focused on nutrition, which I will talk about at the end. But just to let you know, in the chat, I've put the link to my free training, and it's also in the description if you're watching this back as a recording. And I've put it along the bottom there, where you will get a lot more deeper dive information, especially around nutrition, which is really, really important part of this. You can do all the training you like, but if you haven't got your nutrition on point, you won't see results. You won't build muscle, you won't get stronger without the correct nutrition. So that's mistake number 1. Mistake number 2, I did this one as well. Too much cardio, endurance training. I had a woman approach me wanting me to be her coach recently, and she was training for a half marathon. And I turned her down because, no, it wasn't a half marathon. It was a marathon. It was a marathon. You cannot build muscle if you're training for a marathon. Some people are going to argue with that, and there'll always be an outlier that's managed to do it. But generally, because it's so hard as a woman over 40, it's going to be really hard to build muscle if you're training for a marathon. If you're, younger, but if you're over 40, you've got no chance, because what's going to happen is every time you're doing that cardio training, I know because I used to train for a half marathon as well, and I was the biggest I've been you know, I only lost weight when I started implementing strength training. You're just undoing everything that you've done in the gym or your home gym with lifting weights. So endurance training does not go, particularly long distance running, does not go with building a muscular physique, I'm afraid. It might do when you're young, but not when you're older. Mistake number 3, not lifting heavy enough. I'm going to be talking about how to know how heavy you're lifting, because everyone's different. I cannot give you a weight and say that's the weight you should be lifting. Everyone's different. But and I'll show you now. So if I'm doing a bicep curl, and I was demonstrating this to my clients, and I could get all the way to 15 reps, and it wasn't really a struggle. That's not heavy enough. That's too easy, because the last 1 to 3 reps, so it should be like that. It's like really, really tough. Can you see that? So I get a bit closer. It should be so tough. A lot of the time I'm actually shaking, or it's like that. It could be to failure or almost failure. Failure can be a little bit dangerous, because if you're doing a squat with a barbell in the gym and you haven't got someone spotting you and you're going down, and failure means you cannot get back up again and there's no one there, that's actually dangerous. So I never say to failure, but close to failure. If it's a bicep curl, yeah, you could do it to failure. So many women find, if you go to a body pump class or something like that, and you're dancing, there's the music on, and you're all doing it together, and you can get right to the end, that is not progressive overload. You're not going heavy enough. You're not going to build visible muscle. So that's mistake number 3. Not increasing the intensity is mistake number 4. So every time you lift, like I did my training session this morning, I take this book with me, and it's my training log. And in it, I know, because I'm purposely at the moment, because I lost some muscle, trying to put on muscle. And so I write it all down in my training log. The weight I've lifted, how many reps and how many sets I've done. And the next week when I go in, or the next time I do that particular session, which today was chest, shoulders and triceps, I will look at the previous session on that body part, and I'll say, right, I've got to go heavier, or I've got to do more reps. I've got to do something that's going to increase the intensity. And that's what progressive overload is. And I'm going to get into that in a minute. But the mistake is not increasing the intensity. So what happens is, if you went in your home gym or the gym, you picked up some dumbbells, and every week you're doing 3 sets of 10, your body just gets used to it. And of course, the longer you've been training, the harder it gets to put on muscle. So for somebody like me, I've been training for years. I've got to really focus. I don't look at my phone. I don't have any distractions. Sometimes I put my headphones in. And what I'm really focusing on is the mind-muscle connection. And I'm focusing on improvement every single time. So in the bodybuilding community, we actually call it improvement season, because what you do is you fuel your body correctly. You're not in a calorie deficit. You're either going to be I'm probably in maintenance, or maybe a slight surplus, just so that I can get enough calories in where my performance in the gym is really going to improve every time I go in. And that's what everyone should always be aiming for. So your intensity is really important. And the final mistake, there's probably others, but these are the main ones that I see people make, is nutrition. If you haven't got your nutrition dialed in, you might as well forget it. And that's why if you go to my free training, I'm going to give you the whole guide on nutrition plus some downloads to go with it. So you go off with all the information and all the PDFs that will help you implement all of this training and nutrition for yourself. So that's actually at the top of the chat. If you're watching the recording back, the link is in the description. I would highly recommend that you do that. So I'm going to talk about progressive overload now. And people sort of get that it sounds a bit sort of technical and complicated. I can assure you it's not. It's really what I just described, is making sure the intensity is being upped every time you work out. So you're not lifting the same weight at, the same level every time, because what happens is your body just gets used to it. So I gave you the example of, the bicep curl. It can be more challenging when you've got your home gym, but you want to be basically taking a weight that's going to make it so the last 1 to 3 reps are almost a failure. You can barely lift it. And so if I'll just demonstrate again in fact, I'll do it kneeling down so you can see it better, with a shoulder press. So I'd want to be able to kind of, if I'm comfortably doing 15 reps like this, it's not heavy enough, because I want to get to the point, and it might take me a while to get there, where I'm literally sweating, but it's still, these are too light for me, because what I should be doing is that, where the last 1 to 2 reps are like really, really hard. Then I know that that is the right weight. So once you get that sort of fixed in your head and you want to do the mind muscle connection, and most women can lift heavier than they think they can, that's what you want to be aiming for. But you don't want to lose your form. So one thing that bros do, we don't do this. They'll go in the gym and they'll get the dumbbells out and they want to, they're looking around, they think, oh yeah, I want to show the other guys what I'm capable of. And I know there's guys in there that have got 40-kilo dumbbells and they're trying to do chest presses or something like that. And it's way too heavy for them and their form goes off. So if I give you an example with a bicep curl, if they're doing that, can you see I'm losing momentum? So I'm not actually working the muscle. So you must always be not lifting the weight, working the muscle. What does that mean? Slow and controlled. Not swinging it around and using momentum. If you know, and sometimes I have to be disciplined and put the weight away because I think that's too heavy for me. I'm not actually getting the right proper form. And so if you don't have proper form, what happens? Well, firstly, you could get injured, but also you're not really working the muscle. So always remember that. A guy that I know from the gym taught me that. He said, work the muscle, don't lift the weight. And so we're lucky because we're women. We don't want to show off at how heavy we can lift, which is like a guy problem generally. And so we don't mind if we look silly and go down to a lighter weight. And that's the best thing to do if you need to. So it's kind of the opposite of what I've said before. Go as heavy as possible, but it's go as heavy as possible with great form and not lifting the weight, working the muscle. So yeah, we've talked about gradually getting heavier and heavier each week, but if you can't get heavier, do extra reps. So it might be like, a lot of women find, I haven't shown this one today, shoulder exercises particularly challenging to get heavier on. So if we were doing lateral raises, and it's like, if I go up to the next weight, which in the UK would add another kilo on each side, that's going to be really hard with doing lateral raises. So what you might do is just add in extra reps rather than going up a weight. And also, if you've got a very minimal amount of home equipment, you might just add extra reps in or extra sets. You can also shorten the rest time between sets, and that will give you the progressive overload, because you've just, there are some specific techniques that you can do that with. So one of them is something called a drop set, where you actually have no rest time between sets, and you start off with a heavy weight and then you drop the weight down. So if I show you again, I'm going to do it with this is a heavier dumbbell than the other ones. So I'm going to do lateral raises, and say I do 10 lateral raises. So what's that? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm pretty fatigued, but not quite as much. I'd need to take a heavier weight if I wasn't doing this. And I drop it down and I go straight again. And that is going to really challenge and burn my muscles. And sometimes I even do a triple drop set where I drop the weight down again even further. So that's shortening the rest time between sets. That's a drop set. Another technique is a superset. So you perform one exercise after the other, but they're different exercises, but there's no rest between. So I will just demonstrate. So it could be a shoulder press. Sorry, I'll go do a shoulder press rather than a row first. So I do 10 shoulder presses. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then I go straight into 10 rows. And it's working different muscles. Quite good if you're short on time, because these kind of workouts are much quicker. But you will find that you can't go quite as heavy. It is challenging. So I tend to just put 1 or 2 supersets into my routine, and generally it's when I've probably plateaued and I can't go any heavier. So what I do is a superset. It's just like impossible to go heavier, which is a way of shortening the rest time between sets. Another really good technique, if you can't go heavier, is to slow the movement down. When I was training for one of my bikini competitions, I used to do a squat that was like this, and it nearly made me cry quite a few times. So if I go, I'll do the raised heels with my book, Kickstart Fat Loss. I'll do the raised heels because it's just going to make my squat a little bit better on the form. And so what we're doing, because we can't take the weight heavier, maybe you haven't got a heavier weight you can take because you're at home, or if you're in the gym and you've kind of plateaued and you're thinking, well, I can't go any heavier on this barbell squat or something because it's just killing my back. So what I'm going to do is totally change it so that I slow the movement down. And so what I would do when I was training for the competition and I built a substantial amount of money, substantial amount of muscle on this, is count for 5 seconds down, pause for 2 seconds at the bottom, and then come back up. So I'll show you. And you do that 10 times, just on an empty bar or a light weight, and it absolutely kills. And I used to be kind of sweating and groaning at the end of it, and it was much harder than going heavier. And I sometimes revert to that when I know I want to sort of really challenge myself. So the long and short of it is, I'm going to sort of come back over there now. I've done a lot of the demoing of the exercises. The long and the short of it is, you do have to push yourself when you're doing any kind of strength training. And it's harder when you're on your own to do that. If you've got a training partner or you're part of a team, or I would highly recommend you get yourself a journal. You can get these really cheaply on Amazon, because if you're anything like me, your memory is quite poor, right? And so if you've got a training log where you're logging everything you're doing, how much you're lifting, that's how I'm improving. So I'm trying to sort of build some muscle at the moment, and that's exactly what I do, and it really does work. So I'm just going to pop in and just check if there's any. Oh, lots of comments and questions. Thank you very much. Someone was saying about they get bored with food. Yeah, I mean, I don't get bored, I must say. I think it's just swapping out. Someone's put a very good comment there. Let's just see this one, because it's more about the strength training. So I'm just going to put this question up. Are you still there, Puchunga? I've been doing 20-pound dumbbells, so I figured they may be too heavy. So I lower the weight to 12.5-pound dumbbells, and it's a bit better, but still awkward to go back. So I think the thing is, it's just reminding yourself of that rule. It depends what exercise it is. 20-pound dumbbells, you don't say what exercise it is. What you'll find is that your lower body, you'll be able to lift a lot heavier than your upper body. So that's the first thing to sort of think about. And then if you go by that rule, like the last 1 to 3 reps should be a real struggle, and you're, almost to failure, like you can't do another one, then you know that is about the right weight for you. So I hope that helps. But now I'm just going to have a quick look at this poll that I asked you guys to complete at the start, which was telling me, where you are with how much muscle you want to build. I'm going to see if I can find it now, because the answer for everyone should really be, and I'm just looking to see. So I've put, what are your thoughts on building muscle over 40? Build as much muscle as possible was 65% of you. Well, that is absolutely amazing, because that is the right answer. There is a right or a wrong answer. So I have clients that say to me, when should I stop? And it's like, but the thing is, the more muscle that you've built, the harder it is to build even more muscle. So you never stop. You never sort of sit back and think, oh, okay, I'm just going to do light weights or medium weights now. Even if you've reached your goal, the goal should always be to build as much muscle as possible, because as you get older, it gets harder. And as you get more muscle on you, it's harder to make a difference. So the pursuit is, and I've been doing this, I'm almost 59 now, and I've been doing this for sort of, about 9 years, is the pursuit is always to build more muscle. That never changes. And so it can take years to build muscle anyway. So you're never going to get bored. You're never, there's always something that you want to improve anyway in your physique. Some of you, 31% said, I'd like to build a little muscle. That's the wrong answer. You can't just build a little muscle. You're going to have to really push hard to even build, and it will be a little bit at first anyway. It takes years. So your whole mindset shouldn't be, I just want to build a little bit of muscle. I'm just trying to think of an analogy now. It's like I suppose it's like I don't really want, I just want a little bit of like weight loss. It's not really what you want, is it? Most people don't anyway. Or I just want to kind of like a little bit of physique. You've got to have it's 100% commitment to build muscle. Take it from someone I know, that's me, but also I've worked with over 13,000 women through my programs. It takes a lot of effort. And the people that I see doing amazing, that really transforms their body, whether they want muscle or visible muscle or not, the way that they do it is their approach to training is amazing. The people that are really successful at this, they really do, they hit it hard and they do everything that I've described in this live. And then there's a few of you, 4% said you're scared of getting bulky. You can't get bulky. It's just basically impossible. You can't. As a woman that's menopausal, you're going to be, you're just going to be really up against it in terms of trying to put on muscle. Nature is against you. And so you've got to do everything you can to sort of even put on a little bit of muscle is going to take a lot of effort, and everything that I've described in this live event. And what I would say is you have to get your nutrition right. So this is the sort of last point of this whole live event, is you can do all the training and you can even have a training plan. I would highly recommend that you actually have a plan. You don't just go and second guess it, go into your room. I don't believe in follow along workouts either. I think you have to have a proper training plan. And if you're following along, you're not really getting progressive overload, because whoever the video is that's doing it with you, unless you're a beginner, if you're a beginner, that's probably all right. But once you've been sort of doing it for 6 to 8 weeks, you want to ditch follow along and you want to go at your own pace so that you're really increasing the weight and getting progressive overload and really challenging your muscle. And so, as well as that, nutrition is really important to get it right. So, of course, that's going to be protein, that's going to be macros, which is your protein, carbs, and fats. Having a proper macronutrient-based nutrition plan, and tracking and measuring your food, which kind of means weighing it out. And that's what I do. That's what I have all my women doing. And so if you want to learn more about that, click the link. It's in the description if you're watching this back as a recording. It's in the chat to my free training. I'm going to take you through all the nutrition. It's a video, but you also get some amazing PDF downloads, including my free nutrition guide. So you can kind of go off and implement this for yourself. And then next Friday, the 26th of January at the same time, so that's 12 Eastern time and 5 UK time, I am going to be going live and showing you how to get in 150 grams of protein per day and build the body that you've always dreamed of. So we've nailed how to do it with your lifting today, but next week I'm going to show you how you can do this with food. So thank you very much for joining, everyone. I hope to see you on the next live. Do tell your friends, and you know, everyone is welcome. And see you on the next live, guys.